Today is April the 2nd. This is the Budget and Finance Committee meeting for the Recreation Centers of Sun City West. My name is Dick Rhodes, and I'm the chairman of the Budget and Finance Committee. I'd like to, for those of you that can, we could stand and pledge allegiance to the flag. Call the meeting to order at 9 a.m. We do have a quorum. One of our members is on remotely, so we'll try to get an acknowledgement from him. Dwayne Parsons, are you on by chance? If he joins us later, we'll acknowledge that. But Dwayne is excused. Before I start the meeting, I want to extend a welcome to two of our newest board members that are sitting in the audience right now. One of them has already participated in a board event, and the other will be very soon. So we welcome you, Jolene Paskowski, and where is Rudy Grom, clear in the back. So welcome. And I want to acknowledge the candidates that ran for the board that came in second place. We appreciate the fact that you took the time and spent the diligence on making and having a campaign. So to you, I take my hat off. You gave us an election that we haven't had in a couple years, and I can only look forward to next year that we'll have the same amount of enthusiasm for people wanting to run for the governing board. So to that, I tell all of those candidates that that were not elected, thank you very much, and we appreciate and respect everything you've done. Thank you. So we're going to review the minutes. I'm going to present the minutes from the March 19th meeting of the Budget and Finance Committee. And if there's no objection, we're going to approve them as presented. So moved. Thank you. We have two main items on our agenda today. One of them is capital. We have two items that we want to look at on capital, and the other one is going to be our FY25 budget. The FY25 budget is going to be two pieces. There's one of the actual budget itself, and then the elephant in the room is what are we going to do about the proposed legislation for increased minimum labor costs. So we're going to start off with item 3.01, and we're going to ask Carl to present it for us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Director Rhodes. Good morning, committee. Welcome, audience. Here we are in April for our overall proposed capital budget. We only have two changes from our previous month, March review. Both of these changes have come about due to good discussions from our other committees, primarily properties. So in our new capital proposed requests, the Beardsley Park iron fence, 4 foot tall and gates, was requested to add an additional gate and some concrete for a walkway for safety egress. And we are good in being able to provide that request. So $10,000 was added to that project to make it $67,500. And those are the only changes in the new capital category. And then moving over to our repair and replacement items in blue. The only change is an addition, also from discussions from our properties committee and concerns from our tennis facility users that our evaluation of the aging of the resurfacing of courts and deferring it another year. It has been requested that we do not defer it, and we actually include it in this capital budget. So Properties Committee, the leadership from tennis and staff members, myself, Russ Boston, other staff members, we all took a community look, walked all the courts, and Properties Committee has made a recommendation to resurface these courts that are currently residing fully funded in the reserve study tool as of last year, and asking for it to be added in this coming budget. That is $160,000 to resurface courts 1 through 16 as tennis courts. And those are the only changes to the budget for April. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I have one I'd like to start off with. The $160,000 was a bit of a surprise to us. It just kind of showed up overnight. So we're going to be looking very, very closely at all of our capital projects simply because of the issue with the Arizona minimum wage. So we're looking at all items, including big ticket items. So is this a safety issue, or is this something that I just really like to have?
Manufacturer's recommendations for the sports court surfaces is 5 years. When Russ and I do our yearly reviews of all capital items proposed and coming directly from our reserve study tool, we take a look at all of our amenities, evaluate. So an example would be this room. This room has had the carpet up for replacement for 2 years in a row, and we have deferred it because it's good condition. We do that in all areas. We did that during our Properties Committee tours, and initially no response or comments to making this recommendation was at that time. But as the season's gone by, the fading and aging of that court beyond 2 years is showing sanding, so that when the sanding happens, it becomes a lot more slick for the players. We do take care of that through general cleaning, but they have met their age life, we all agree as a group. And this is a fair recommendation to be included for preventing any safety issues.
Yeah, did you have a question? So one of the, I guess I'm still stuck is this a safety issue?
There is no current active safety issue because we do our due diligence of cleaning.
Well, $160,000 is a lot of money.
It's already saved in the reserve study tool, and it's a reserve study item, so it's already been planned for. We were just being efficient by pushing it additional years, and now it has met its useful life.
Okay, open it up to the committee. Yes, Lynn?
Thank you. Carl, does the resurfacing of the tennis courts, will they all be tennis courts? I know there was some discussion previously that perhaps they would put some pickleball courts there and some tennis courts. Is that the intent when you resurface it?
I am here to share that today the Properties Committee asked for all 16 courts to be converted and resurfaced to, not converted, but resurfaced to tennis. I will tell you that I'm going to put out some trending information at the next governing board workshop that allows the governing board to make best decisions for the future. Should these be all 16 tennis courts, or should some combination be resurfaced to the idea of maybe pickleball courts? So I would expect more information at the workshop.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Director Kellis. That was very good. Dr. Miller?
So Carl, what I'm interpreting what you're saying is you have a borderline safety issue because you're having to do extra maintenance to maintain the surface in a clean way.
It's the maintenance that we do already, but we've never experienced having desanding coming out of the paint surface. So that truly has shown that we have met its useful life.
Okay. So again, my interpretation of what you're saying is that, yeah, it's a safety issue, although you don't want to call it that. My other question would be, okay, it's $160,000. Do you have any other item on the repair and replace? So really what you're talking about doing is moving this forward 1 year from what I understand.
That is correct. That was
Okay.
the intention, was to push it one more year.
Right. Okay. So the question I have is, do you have anything on this list of comparable value that you can push back a year to offset that?
I will let you make that decision.
No, that's not the question I'm asking. What I'm asking is that if you have
I'll let Cliff speak
something
then.
that's in an appropriate condition, that it could go one more year. Clearly, you have stuff that sometimes is borderline, and you make a judgment call. Okay, I'm just looking at it from the point of view, this is an additional expense that kind of came, just let me finish. It kind of came out of nowhere, okay? I always have been very proactive about things that are safety related in my mind. So I think this needs to get done. I'm simply looking at it, can we balance it somehow? Cliff?
Go ahead.
So the recommended list here is coming from operations. We're also in agreement with the properties committee that this could be moved up. I think we need to keep in mind that yes, it's $160,000 in spend, but it is on the reserve study at an almost fully funded balance minus 1 year. So the fact that we move it up, it's not like spending $160,000 in new capital. It's not the same impact on the reserve fund. Okay. So this is something that's going to get done next year, and we could hold off and do it next year. It's at the point now though, that if it were at the condition that it was when we did the walk originally with the properties committee, when we went through all these projects and decided what can get deferred and what needs to get done right away. If it were at that condition before, it would have been on this list. And so the conditions have changed. It's at a point now where we're recommending that we do it. And we don't really want to sacrifice another repair and replacement project in place of this. That wouldn't be our recommendation. That's why he's not answering that question necessarily the way you want, because we wouldn't recommend that. We look at it just like every other project on here, that it should be done.
You know, it's not a question of whether he's answering it the way I want or not.
Okay.
He answered it in an honest way that said, no, there's nothing that can be taken off. So we have to add this back in, and it wasn't part of the original planning. Part of our job is always look at options, okay? That's what I'm trying to do.
Do we have any other questions from the committee? Director Novello?
Thank you. My colleagues have already asked the first two questions I had. I'm not the expert you are, Carl, by far on some of the materials that we use. But I did note there's a pretty big difference between resurfacing a pickleball court and resurfacing the tennis court in terms of cost. Can you just tell us, is this a bigger project? Is it different materials? There's a pretty, I mean, it's a huge difference.
Well, it's actually proportionate. So 4 pickleball courts are the equal cost of 1 tennis court. So,
Correct.
and I did check that against our vendors that come to the bidding table, and that is also proportionate. So other than the unknown scope of works, area repairs, like if you got extra cracks or seam fills and things that
Right.
add to the cost. But if you go to the rest of this budget and divide out or times 4 pickleball courts, you'll see that
Right, that would be 120,000. This is 160. It's close, but it's not exactly the same. So we have a 10 pickleball resurfacing for about 30,000. It's 29 and change on here. So unless I'm missing it correctly, pickleball courts resurfaced $20,000 at Johnson. Right. So that was the reason for the, and I know that it's 4 to 1.
that's based
from
off of an
size.
estimate. So if that vendor
Gotcha.
gave me the lowest, that's what
I
I based it on.
understand. So the amounts are based on, 160 is based on the current best estimate for that facility. I
Approximately,
didn't understand the difference.
approximately $2,500 average per pickleball court. So 4 of those is a tennis court.
Right. And we have 10 courts.
16.
Right. No, I'm looking at pickleball court
Oh,
resurface, 10 courts for Well, one of the estimates, and there was a little variability. So again, some are 25, some are close to 30. So say $30,000 for 10 pickleball courts times 4, because we have 10 tennis courts, right? Am I doing the math correct? So, so again, there's a bit of a
160
discrepancy. But again, that's something that we can go and dig into properties. It's just a matter of getting the right bid, correct?
160,000 is what's being proposed, and then we go out to bid for.
Right. And I perhaps, for Dr. Miller, you made a good suggestion. It might be something that we could recommend to the governing board if we all agree, right? That we would remove, we could identify a few of the items that we think could be potentially deferred, right? And allow the governing board to settle that as a whole. It's one thought to balance this out a little bit, if that's something that we choose to do. Thank you.
Let's move on to the next item, and it's actually an increase in new capital for. Oh, we did. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know. Mr. Brignato, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Dick. You're forgiven. I'm sure that I'm not the only person in this community who believes that we have far more tennis courts than we need. And while sometimes it may get busy and every court is filled, I'd like to see hard and fast numbers on the usage of that facility. Maybe 16 courts is just too large now. There's not enough tennis players. And so only 10 courts would need then to be resurfaced until we figure out what to do with the others that don't get worked on. Meanwhile, we've got a proposal that talks about doing work over at Kuntz. That appears to have been put on the back burner until we figure out what to do with that facility as well. And there has been chatter about taking some of those pickleball courts and moving them over to R.H. Johnson. And so it's gotten kind of confusing. And I really think that we need to come up with a big picture plan about what to do with both of those tennis facilities before we spend money on either of them. That's my opinion.
Thank you. Any other questions? Let's go ahead and proceed to the next item, and it's actually on the new capital, and it's one that we had recommended approval on. It's the Beardsley Iron Fence. It's an increase of $10,000. I think that's for an additional gate. Is that right?
Gate and concrete.
Gate and concrete. Anybody have any questions over that? Okay. So let's, do we have any, one in the audience that has a question? Do we have anyone online?
We do. First, to let you and the committee know, committee member Dwayne Parsons is not able to, he did not receive a link to
Okay.
speak.
Okay.
So he's chatting online. And that is our only question.
Okay. Welcome, Dwayne. So then let's deal with the two items. Does anyone have any objection to leaving them in? Start with you, Mr. Vignato.
I'd like to see the tennis recoding of the courts deferred until next year.
Okay. Hang on. So that's a no for you.
Correct, that's a no.
Director Novello?
I'd propose that we look for an opportunity to defer another item. I'm also of the opinion this sounds like a burgeoning safety issue. So before we move forward, I would recommend to the governing board that we pull out something of lesser or equivalent value to balance.
I think we have two issues. I think we have to deal with this, and then we can go to
I see. So
another issue.
so if it's a yes or no, I say yes,
To keep it in?
to keep it in.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Davis?
Proceed as recommended.
Dr. Miller?
Keep it in.
Mr. Bosak?
Leave it in.
Yes, leave it in.
Ms. Gelson? So the committee is going to to recommend that we not pull those. We'll leave those as be. Thank you very much. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
It's good. That was a good discussion, good comments. Okay. We've already taken the recommendation. Did I not ask for the audience? I thought I did. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead and go to the podium or to the microphone.
For Mr. Lees, a clarifying question, if I may, Director Rhodes. You said that can we now, at this time, do we revisit our recommended pullouts pursuant to Dr. Miller's suggestion? What is your recommendation on that?
What I'd like to do is to make disposition on this now.
Right, this is our
would-
last meeting to recommend any pullouts, and if we'd like to make a swap or recommend one, this is the time
Okay,
to do it.
let's do that after this and before we proceed
Thank
to
you.
the next. It's going to be a new. Go ahead. It's a continuation. Okay. All right.
Thank you, Director. Bruce Lees, 135422. I just have a brief comment on the overall budget proposals. I propose that the Budget and Finance Committee strenuously review the new capital improvements proposals included for the 24-25 budget to suspend any funds being proposed to be spent pending the outcome of the ballot initiative to raise the minimum wage increase and recommend to the governing board these expenditures be delayed until the outcome of the ballot initiative is determined. It is not prudent to spend the association's capital on projects that are deemed wants and not needs. Thank you very much.
You're about 2 steps in front of us right now, because the next item on the agenda after we deal with the capital pullouts is that exact issue that you discussed. It's coming. Oh, yeah, it's coming. We're actually going to deal with that, and there's going to be 2 parts to that we're going to deal with. So thank you very much for bringing that up. Okay, so let's go ahead and proceed to discussion of reviewing any items that we're going to reconsider that's on the list now. Just keep in mind that if this is on the R&R, that it really doesn't affect the money is already there, so it's in the reserve fund. So and I'm going to open this up, so whoever wants to begin the discussion. Dr. Miller, would you like to begin that?
I'd be thrilled. Okay, so I just want to remind myself, we went through these lists at the last meeting, and we voted as a committee about what we would recommend not be moved forward. It might benefit the committee, those of us who have poor memory issues, and perhaps the general audience, if we can, to go back over what our recommendation was.
I have that right here. We identified 4 items. 3 of them were new capital. The first item that we identified was $100,000 in the library expansion architectural review. Pull that. The second item was Lizard Acres project for $225,000. Pull that. The third item was the Kuntz tennis renovation, whatever we want to call that project, but we all know what we're talking about. And that was a $50,000 project. And then the fourth item was the softball field fence repair for $495,000. So we only had 4 items. So if that refreshes your memory,
Okay.
and but the floor is still open for discussion.
So are we looking at any items of a particular dollar value or simply anything on the list?
That's, I can't say because I'm not sure what we're going to, it's up to the committee.
Okay, so we're really asking ourselves, are there additional items we wish to pull
Yeah.
from this list?
We're taking a second bite at the apple. You know, we've looked at this once, now we need to look again. In light of the additional $160,000, you know, there's a sense that we need to try to balance that out. So,
If there is a sense of that, then, right.
if there is, yeah.
Then, may I suggest, we could go through this again, but we spent hours on it and we've spent hours on it for the past 8 meetings. So perhaps if a simpler recommendation if we are in agreement, we can vote or get a consensus, yay or nay, to recommend that the governing board balance this, if necessary. I mean, if we feel like there's a need to balance, please ask the Properties Committee and the Governing Board to recommend a few items that would come closer to balance. Does that make sense?
And I think what they would tell us is, what do you want to do? You know, because otherwise, I think what they'll say is that you have to take a position on it. The Properties Committee has already indicated that they think this is important. So,
They have, and the Properties Committee also recommended many more pullouts than we did. Just being honest. So nonetheless, if it's not something that we want, I'm not comfortable, I haven't analyzed this. There are lots of opportunities to pull more money out. So I'm fine with the pullouts that we've already identified. And I've already said that I feel it's a burgeoning safety issue. I'll maintain my position.
So I think I still have the floor. The only other things that I see on here that I have questions about, you know, and I play golf, and I go to all the golf courses, and I see $60,000 worth of furniture for the golf courses. And I sit in those chairs 2 or 3 times a week and use those tables, and I don't see anything wrong with them. And so I really wonder why we're proposing to spend $60,000. Now, maybe it's quote unquote at the end of its useful life, but you know, the reality, they're not unattractive. They seem to be in good shape. And so I really wonder, is this simply that we're on the rotation for that? Or is there a real driver? And then I look at the fact that Desert Trails is 20,000, the other courses are 10. I know we've expanded the seating area at Desert Trails, so maybe it's simply they need some new furniture to accommodate the larger footprint they have. That would be fine. I look at Grandview, and I think, as we know, Grandview has a restaurant. The furniture that's there is completely different than the other places. So, you know, why is the cost for that the same as the other things? Anyway, so I would really question whether we need to spend $60,000 on furniture for the patios.
have further discussion? Mr. Bugnato? Oh,
Thank you, Mr. Bagnato. My hand was up for about 5 minutes. Last meeting, Director Rhodes told us we were not allowed to speak to any items that were under $50,000, or I would have already pointed that out.
Mr. Bugnato?
I think perhaps the tables and chair issues need to be looked at as one whole number rather than individual numbers, so we get over that 50,000. David, I kind of disagree with you about at least the condition of the chairs on the patios. If you look closely at the slats where they reach the very front of the chair, many of those slats are showing cracks. I did see 1 or 2 chairs that wasn't even functionable any longer. No one would sit on them, and so these cracks in the chairs are becoming a safety issue. But look closely, they're there in the plastic, and you know, I'd be the first one to say absolutely not, don't replace things, but I can see where these chairs would be a safety issue. As far as the tables, I'm just not sure, you know, why would we replace the tables? They seem to be perfectly functional and none of them are breaking. there's always been an issue of the table legs falling out of the bottom when people go and pick up the tables, but that could easily be solved. And we've got the man right here, maybe a couple of machine screws. He's shaking his head. Ah, okay, so per Russ Boston, we're not fixing furniture, we just replace it. The point is that I don't think that the tables need to be replaced. The chairs most definitely, and I'm hard pressed to believe that the tables and chairs would even cost $10,000. Just doesn't seem likely to me.
No. The issue for the $50,000 threshold was we were relying on our staff to make that determination, and that we have to have some point of reference for what are we going to review. And so $50,000 has been the threshold that we set. We set 50,000 to basically 100,000, or to under 100,000, 100,000 over. Now, we have staff, and I'm going to look right now at Russ Boston because he's sitting in the back, and it's his staff and the staff from golf that are making these determinations. I'm afraid we're starting to micromanage. And I'm not sure that's what we're here to do. You know, we're here to make a determination of prudent and prudent spending. You know, so do you have something from golf that you'd like to add? I mean, you've been standing.
Pat O'Hara, Golf Operations Manager. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the patio furniture. For those of you that have been in the community quite a while, the furniture prior to this last batch was kind of a mix and match of plastic chairs and colorful tables. And we had a lot of the legs break. They were breaking 1 and 2 at a time. So we made a decision, and we did a lot of study, and I'm going to plug Costco. We ended up buying all that patio furniture from Costco, and it was on sale, and we got a heck of a deal, and it's really outlived its useful life. We planned on it lasting 5 years, and we paid about $5,000 a set, 10 tables and 40 chairs at each place. This last year, we replaced Stardust furniture because when Stardust was closed, we moved their furniture over to Deer Valley to put under the awning on the front of the clubhouse. We're scheduled to do the same thing over at Desert Trails later this year. So the $10,000 came about doing our investigation on patio furniture and finding out that the sources that we have can give us the biggest bang for the buck. The thing that we're trying to ride that middle ground is we want nice furniture that matches, that doesn't pinch people when they get up out of the chair, but we don't want it so nice that it walks off during the night. So we're trying to balance that, and we feel really comfortable with the $10,000 number. To answer Dr. Miller's question about Grandview, we at one time replaced the Crooked Putters furniture with some cast aluminum furniture, and it was very nice. We found it didn't last very well, and then we said to Jeff and Gina that the furniture over there is going to be on your nickel going forward. So we're trying to balance this out. It does need to be replaced. I've got 25 or 30 chairs that have been completely broken, and the tables we're seeing a little bit of wear and tear too. So I really would strongly suggest that we try to replace this if we can. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you. Do I have any other comments from the governing board? Mr. Bosak? Mr. Bosak?
I'm thinking how I want to get started here. There isn't anybody in the room knows more about what's going on with each of these projects than Carl. And I understand your reluctance to take on the responsibility of trying to pick and choose what ought to offset whatever. So I'm not being critical at all of you. At the same time, the library expansion and the Kuntz project are $150,000. And we recommended that both those projects be removed, even though they're in new capital versus repair and replacement. And if the governing board decided to agree with all the committee's recommendation to remove those, which I think they all recommend taking them out, you got your 160 almost. And if that balances that way, just my thought.
Carl?
New is always the instrument of being able to make best decisions. You know, new is what supports our community and their requests. Usually they come from clubs. And, you know, we take that seriously. You take that seriously. But our repair and replacement items are not the taking it seriously category because it's already fully funded. It's an asset we own. It needs to be replaced. If we kick the can, that's all we're doing is kicking the can. So it does no benefit. We've done our review with staff, you know, and we are the subject matter experts on this. So we wouldn't ask for it if we didn't need it from a repair and replacement side of things. The new, I defer and I say, if you have something on this new list that better serves our budget and cutting it, that's a decision that you guys make. So.
Thank you, Carl. You and the property committee people, I think we have to respect their judgment as well. They've spent a lot more time looking at these things than we probably have, and if they had concerns about this, they would have voiced them. It seems to me that they've strongly supported the remodel or the challenge of repair, and in my mind, I would have to support their decision.
If Russ and I wouldn't have made a deferral in the first place, this would be on the list and it would just be with everything else that's in the blue category, and we would be discussing the overall dollar amount, not so much the line item. But the fact that we've done our due diligence, we did meet with properties, the tennis community leadership, and say, hey, we really do have something that needs to be addressed that wasn't there 7-8 months ago. That's why we're bringing this today. So,
Thank you. We have already, oh, I'm sorry, Christine.
I just want to withdraw my suggestion from earlier. I realized I was out of order, Dr. Miller. I guess I hadn't been recognized to say so, so I wanted to say it clearly. I withdraw my earlier suggestion and encourage us to move on.
Okay. So let's move forward. Do we have anyone in the audience that would like to have a comment? Has Mr. Parsons sent anything in? Let's start with Mr. Parsons before we do
Dwayne Parsons agrees to proceed.
Thank you.
Good morning, Larry Plaster, 130627. I'm the president of the tennis clubs. I'd just like to address, you asked for audience comments. It passed very quickly and I didn't get up fast enough. But to Mr. Bagnato's comments about the use of the tennis courts, I also, in addition to the president and the membership chairman, and I track all of the usage statistics for the tennis courts. We use all the tennis courts. We have more than 2,500 logins a month. 65% or more of our 400 members play at least once and usually multiple times a month. The 4 major events that we conduct, actually 5 counting our tournament, needs all of the courts. You can't split those up and get those things done. So I know it's been said we're not using the tennis courts. That's not true. And I can show you the numbers if you want to see it. The other item I want to address is the safety issue. Carl's guys do an excellent job working those courts every day, trying to keep them clean, but they're wearing more rapidly every week. And they're clean in the mornings. After 4 hours of all the courts being used, the sand starts to come off, and we have had people slip and hurt themselves. So it's not a safety issue as long as we can keep them clean. Keeping them clean is an issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bosak?
Being this trifecta secretary assignment today, so the minutes reflect what we just agreed to, we're not taking any exception to the two items.
We're in agreement with both of the items.
Thank you.
Okay. An online comment?
I'll read it as stated from Michelle Brunner, 127597. I respectfully request the committee do introductions. The camera doesn't do close-ups. We cannot see your names, and some of us are not familiar with you. Thank you.
We're going to proceed to the next item on the agenda. Item 3.02, proposed FY 24-25 operating budget review. Cliff?
Thank you, Director Rhodes. Good morning, everyone. Here to present the budget changes from the last presentation. Also, we had some takeaways, requests on special events, and continue the discussion on 18 an hour impact. So we're going to do that right now. So kind of talked about this the last time, but I want to give you the number impact and the changes to the budget. So we took our recommendation on golf fees to the golf committee in March, and we had a working group put together, and they came up with a recommendation out of that working group, or maybe not a recommendation. And then we took that, discussed it at golf, and the committee pushed that forward. And so we made the change in the budget, and that was to on the income side for golf revenue. So there's an increase in golf revenue of $133,000, and that comes from the alignment of guest and public rate. So what they wanted to do, we currently have about a $2 difference between our member guest rate and our public rate, and the feeling was that people were maybe taking advantage of that difference, and they wanted to align those two rates. They felt like a lot of the member guests are just people in the community and surrounding communities coming here. So they wanted to align those two rates. So effectively what that did was it took our public rate at the current recommendation up $6, which is what was recommended. And then we had to increase our member guest rate. We had a $3 increase in there, so we had to bring that up $8 instead of $3 to align those two rates. And the impact of that had $133,000 positive impact to our revenue. Okay, so that's change one on the income side. Special events, we're going to talk about that coming up in this presentation, but the impact of that, and we'll get into the details of that, is a $40,000 reduction in revenue based on what's going on this year and evaluating that after getting through the first 3 months of the calendar year of the last 3 months of the fiscal year. We reevaluated that line item, and we'll talk about that in more detail, so I won't get into too many details right now on that. On the expense side, bless you. On the expense side, we had an increase in property and casualty insurance. We had budgeted a 9% increase. That increase came in at 14.8. We just went through that with our broker. We just went through that process with our broker, and we'll be doing a presentation on that May 7th at the BNF meeting to talk about our renewal for our property and casualty insurance. But that came in at roughly 15%, and that had a $36,000 increase in expense for our property and casualty expense that we had to put into the budget. So, and then in the capital section, the impact of those items in our estimated reserve fund allocation created an increase of $57,000 to our estimated reserve fund allocation down in the capital section. So what we had to do, of course, is any increase that's created there, we have to basically we pull that out of member dues to make that balance down in the capital section. So that changed our allocation percent from 7.15 to 7.53. So that was the impact on the financial statement of those changes. And the budget packet is attached, so and it reflects all those changes within the budget packet. So if you want to see the actual income statements and what that looks like, you can reference that. So special events. Okay. So our mission with special events is to provide concerts and specialty acts for the entertainment of our community members and their occasional guests. These are offered at a deeply discounted rate or in some cases at no cost at all. The events department consists of 5 employees, roughly 3.5 FTEs. And although we offer these free or at low cost tickets, events operates at approximately a break even when factoring wages and benefits. So we report the income and the revenue in the income section, gross profit. So we take the hard costs out of the ticket sales, all right? And then we reflect the salary and wages of the events department down in the rec division as far as recreations. So when we take the gross profit, we have a budget this year of $261,000 and offset that with those 3.5 FTEs. It operates essentially at a break even. There's a little bit of a positive in there. So, which is good because even though it operates at a break even, it is subsidized by the community because we're using the facilities that are paid for by the community. We're using the tear down and set up staff at the rec centers, the FAs, things like that. So it is subsidized, but I'm happy to report that we are able to do this at a break even operationally. So the reason for the decrease. So this is this year versus last year to date through February. The left column has a little bit of March in it, so because of the timing of when we did the events. But you can see off to the right are the decrease and the impacts to our events this year. And you can see at the tune of 90,000+, we really experienced a change in our events revenue this year. What were the driving, contributing factors to that? Well, in the fall, we talked about the weather. We talked about the heat. So that had a significant impact, and you'll see that reflected in the ticket sales in the fall of last year versus the fall of this year. Also, just, we had the interest in the new acts just wasn't there. And we've evaluated that, and we've learned from that. But that was something that happened we didn't anticipate when we put the budget together, that would be. We always have generational changes that we have to take into account too. So we've got 3 different generations in this community. So we're trying to balance all of that. So again, I would say that, a learning experience there. And, but, we're always trying to balance the demographics within our community and the events that we have. And, we're getting, it seems as if there's more, some of the bigger clubs are holding events as well, which can be competing to our events that we hold. And we certainly, we're not trying to put a stop to that any shape or form, but that is something that impacts our ticket sales as an association for events. So those are continuing to impact. And then just the increased costs associated, the talent, the production stuff that we have to subcontract, things like that. The costs of that have gone up as well. So those are impacting, those are all things we have to take into account. So in this budget, you'll see I'm not going to go through down through every one of these line items. We want to just put this out there to show what our budget is, and the costs associated. You'll see ticket sales cost, you'll see talent costs and other costs in each one of these line items. And you'll see that there's the total number of tickets and then the percent that we estimate based on, previous years, what we think we would sell in terms of tickets and what that gross profit will be. At the bottom of this section, you'll see those are all the free events that we hold. When I say free, we don't charge for tickets for those events. So those are also offset in the gross profit of events revenue. Okay, so those are tickets, those are events that we're offering to the community at no cost. So a summary of all of that is, first of all, the events and prices are subject to change. So we use this to budget off of. They could change as we move into next year. Weather could impact. Acts could fall off. We might add some new acts or some new events. But this is what we're using to budget off of. But they could change. So keep that in mind. We have 85 total events, 37 paid events, 48 free events, and the budgeted gross profit is $261. The member paid events will generate $281,000. The free events will cost $20,000 to total up to that $261,000. So this is what we use to put our budget together for this year, and that's the comparison year over year. So I want to, if it's okay, Director Rhodes, I'd like to have a break in the presentation before we move on to 18 an hour and answer any questions or comments.
So let's, and do we have any questions from the committee on this? Director or Committee Member Kellis?
Yeah, Cliff, you had mentioned that there seems to be some club events that are hitting up against our rec center events. Is there not some way that the rec center and those, I know there's just probably a few clubs of that size that would affect an event sale. Can we not coordinate scheduling there?
Well, it's not necessarily having the event on the same night. It could be that act could have been seen by a group of people that normally would have paid the rec center to come see the act, and they already saw the act at their club. It might not have been on the same day. So when I say competing, I don't necessarily mean that they're being held on the same day at the same time. I just mean that, there's more events being held by the clubs, which is great. That's what clubs are for. I mean, for social. So, so that's what I mean by that. It's not necessarily but we do have some stipulations in our contracts that if we book an act, they can't be booked a certain amount of time after. So we do have stuff like that, but it just creates a little bit of a challenge for us, and then it keeps us on our toes too, to go out and find new acts and try and get more diversity in what we present.
Thank you.
Director Novello?
Thank you. Just a little bit of feedback. First of all, thanks for the analysis. Really helpful. Just to emphasize, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, the recreation centers and the department are not trying to make a profit. This is just a projection. Although we're using the word profit, it's the revenue over the expenses. I know that's a small
correct.
thing, but we've had some feedback in the past about that. So the other just small bit of feedback while you're evaluating the opportunities for next year, I love, and I get a lot of positive feedback about all the different activities, the different entertainment for 4 generations of individuals who are our neighbors here in Sun City West. So all great, and it's very difficult. I do get a lot of feedback, though, about the ticket prices for dances seem to be very high, and that could be because, again, looking at the cost difference between some of our clubs. So as you're evaluating this, I would encourage you guys to hold those prices steady or even consider decreasing. I know that means we may have to make some compromises elsewhere, but as you're putting together the program for next year, I hope that you'll not raise prices. That was probably a quadruple negative. Did that make sense, though? I need more coffee.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
And that's our objective. We really want to provide these at discounted, deeply
Right,
discounted rates. At the same time, try and cover costs. But yes, we definitely balance
Thank you.
all that. Appreciate the feedback.
Mr. Bernardo?
Thank you, Dick. For those online, I'm Frank Bagnato. I'm here on the Budget and Finance Committee. Slide 2, Cliff, the alignment of guest and public rate fees, greens fees at the golf courses. So I'm kind of confused. I think I heard you say that there were those on the golf committee who thought that perhaps member guests were taking advantage. We only had this separation of rates in place for a year, and now we're going back to what we had before, which was run one rate for anyone, whether they were outside play or whether they were guests. And so what's happening there? How could guests be taking advantage?
Yeah, encourage you to watch the last golf committee, but some of the feedback we received in our working group was that there was this perception in that group of the people in that group that were saying that there were people coming in as guests to pay a lower fee as a guest versus paying the public rate. And it is a little, it does seem like a little wishy-washy because it came out of committee last year to create the two rates, and now it came out of committee to align them. So it happened, but we're building that into the budget based on the recommendation. Ultimately, the governing board will have the final say on whether we do that. But it did come as a recommendation from golf committee, and but the perception was that there were people who may have been trying to game the system to come in at a lower rate, and we still have to have the two rates because we have to identify that golfer, because for public we have to remit transaction privilege tax to the state on that. But that was the impetus behind aligning those rates from that working group.
I guess I'm just confused. I don't know how a guest could somehow game the system. I mean, the tee time needs to be made by a member, and then they include their guests. And unless members are canceling out or just not showing up, and then the guests go ahead and play, but there's really not a member sponsoring them, I just don't see how that could happen. Every Saturday, I bring 3 friends out to play with me. And, they're all residents of other communities, but they come in as my guest, and I play along with them. And based on this proposal, they're going to see a very, very hefty greens fee increase if this goes through the way it is. So that's the one comment I had. I just don't think that's a good idea. But the other comment on slide 7, so we had 48 free events, and we only lost 20,000 on those?
Hard costs, yeah.
I think that's pretty good. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Any other questions from the committee? Anyone in the, did Mr. Parsons have a comment? Okay, anyone in the audience like to comment?
Please don't run. Safety at first.
Good morning, Bruce Lees, 135-422. Just to comment on what committee member Novello mentioned was some of the disparity about the club groups having events versus the sponsored rec center events. Having been here for 4 years and having attended multiple events at different venues, I find that the rec center has increased the ticket prices from when I first moved here in 2020 to current rates of over $10 in the last 4 years per ticket per person. However, as I belong to the Boomers Club, those events, it's difficult to compare a charter club event versus a RSCW event because we have paid staff at RSCW and we have all that other stuff, whereas the clubs provide that labor for free. So, there's not really an actual comparison can be made from revenue from one club paying out a fee for a band versus what the rec centers pay with all the ancillary costs associated with it. However, I think that many of the residents are becoming discouraged because of the rapid price increase over the last 4 years, and they're saying it's just not worth it to pay that money to come to the event. Or as Cliff mentioned earlier, they may have seen that act at another location or another venue. Take, for example, Surprise. Thaddeus Rose is very prominent in this West Valley area, and he makes appearances daily in somewhere around the valley. He did a concert with his full band in Surprise, sponsored by the city of Surprise, for free. Okay? He plays out at Western Trails Ranch for free. But when we want him, we have to pay whatever the contract rate is and such. So people will go drive 15 minutes to listen to him for nothing instead of listening to him for $22 a head for an hour and a half. At those other venues, he pays 2 to 3 hours. Here, he plays for an hour and a half. So a lot of people are just saying, I'm voting with my wallet. There's somewhere else I can get that entertainment. That's all the point I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. Sue Ambler, 129848. Question about directors and officers' liability insurance. Where does that fall? Does that fall in the insurance that you were just talking about?
Yes.
Okay, and that is in the increase as well?
Yeah, the increase in that was, we're going to do a presentation on May 7th on what
Okay.
that was. But yes,
Okay, I'll be there
it's in
for that.
It is in that line item.
Okay, and I appreciate that there is this insurance because I have ran into a lot of associations who don't have it. So
Oh,
thank
yeah.
you.
Hugh Martin, 122481. Just a point of interest is I have a difficulty understanding how people are coming and playing golf that are not guests and yet they're public. And how does that happen? Is there no one there that checks to make sure? As this gentleman just said, he brings his guests to play golf and it works perfectly. Who are these people that are contending that they're guests and they're not? How does that work?
Okay, so again, this didn't come from operations, so I'm going to try and relay this information the best that I can because I was in that working group. But the impression is that a lot of the golfers that come here are from our surrounding communities, and they're not guests coming in from out of town of our members per se. So their thought process is those people shouldn't get a preferred discount on a public rate just because they're coming in as a guest of a member. So they said, why don't you align those rates so they're more like a public person, even though they're a guest, they won't have to pay sales tax because they're not a public person, but they're more of a public golfer type than a guest from out of town that is enjoying a visit with one of their members. So that was the thought process coming out of that working group. Is that, Gary, can I ask you, I mean, you were there, was that your interpretation of what they were trying to come across?
It seemed like there was a person on a mission who wanted to drive some personal experiences and kind of drove the change. And I wasn't at the golf committee meeting to hear what was said, but
Yeah.
that's what came out of the working group.
So am I to understand that there are not people coming and playing golf from the public that are contending their guests and getting a different rate? That's not what's happening?
No, that's not what's happening. You
Thank
have to be accompanied to be a member guest.
Uh, 131829 Nick Turner. I have paid $70 to go see a band at the Musical Instrument Museum. I'm going to pay $60 to see the Phoenix Symphony. I pay $45 to go see the West Valley Symphony. I think we're getting good value for money, even though the ticket prices have gone up. I think we're getting good value for money, and it's just a matter of where and how we choose to subsidize from the principle we have that everybody pays for everything. If we choose to subsidize golf by over $1 million a year, and we're okay with that. We're a golf community. That's what we do. We just have to choose what else we subsidize and to what extent. And I think the balance is probably about right when it comes to entertainment.
Do we have the comments from the floor? Do we have anything online?
We do. Committee member Dwayne Parsons has a question. He says, I have a question concerning the events. Who decides which events are free and which ones have a fee? How are those decisions made?
Going to refer that to Casey Huda, who is our rec activities manager.
Thank you. Thank you. So honestly, the free events have been going on before I even started here almost 9 years ago. Music on the Green was actually introduced when we renovated and rebuilt our pool here. So it started off as a cultural series, if you will, and after COVID, we just kind of made it twice a month, depending upon Todd's overseeing. We have to adjust over that as well. But that has become something that's very popular. A lot of the community enjoys that. I heard a question amongst some people in the back, do we pay for that entertainment? We do, but we also do research and get sponsorships. So that one is sponsored, not fully, but it's spread out through the whole season. We also have the, over at Kuntz, Spotlight, Talent Spotlight. I always get that mixed up. So that's also something that we actually, Dory Miller started. What year did you start that? 2012. So I was a new mom then, and so that's how long and preserved some of these free events are. We used to always have free holiday events, Memorial and 4th of July. However, we have found that that is not being supported too well. So we're taking a little bit different approach this year, as you will find out. But then the cost of the tickets, so we've taken that into consideration too, because when we provide a free concert with our new ticketing software, we have to pay for that. Whereas in the past, with arts people, free tickets that were given out, we did not get charged for. So there's some other additional costs that we have to take into consideration for the free events as well. But it's just been something we've always done. We have taken some away because of the cost, and unfortunately, the lack of participation from the community.
Thank you. No other comments? All right. So we're going to proceed to the other half of your presentation, Cliff. And just to give everyone a heads up, this is a very critical issue that we're dealing with. And it's one that we're going to have to take very seriously. So Cliff?
Okay, jumping right back in here, $18 an hour. We've talked about this, so I want to just give a quick recap of what that means. Essentially, on July 3rd, we'll find out around that time if there's a proposal out there, an initiative to raise the minimum wage to $18 an hour. There is an initiative that will supersede that, to raise it to $18 an hour effective January 1, 2025, which is in this budget cycle. But there's an initiative that will supersede that if it passes, which will raise it an additional $1 per year on top of the CPI increase, the cost of living increase that's done every year. So that's more of a phased-in approach. After 3 years, you get to about the same, maybe a little higher with 18, but you get to about the same spot. So with that said, these initiatives are out for signatures. Those signatures are due July 3rd to the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State will review those. If they get the required signatures, approximately 256,000, they go through a process to validate those. They don't validate all 256, but they do a sampling. And if they are validated, the initiative will get put on the ballot for November. And the initiative will be voted on as part of the November vote, and we'll find out sometime November 8th, 9th, or 10th if this passes or not. in whatever form that it passes. The $18 an hour is something we have to definitely prepare for, and we want to put together a contingency plan for that. And the other initiative that would supersede it, the impact of that would be 100 to 150,000 in this year's budget, and we could weather that. But 18 an hour would require some type of contingency plan if that happened. So how do we plan for something that we don't even know if it's going to get on the ballot till after we budget, and then we don't even know if it's going to pass till almost halfway through our fiscal year? So we've decided the recommendation from this, or the request from this committee to operations, and is to present something that allows us, that helps us with our reserve fund, because ultimately that's where the impact is in our reserve fund. So we put together this proposal, this contingency plan, which essentially holds off on all new capital spend, okay? In this budget right now, the new capital spend is roughly 600,000. It's a little over 600,000. So whatever gets passed or whatever gets approved or budgeted for this budget cycle will have a direct impact dollar for dollar into the reserve fund. So currently it's at 600,000. If it ends up at 300,000 in new capital spend, well, that other 300,000 will already be added back to the reserve fund, so it'll be a dollar for dollar impact. So whatever we put in, which is currently 600,000 in new capital, the contingency proposal is to hold off and delay until we know. Now, we may know July 5th that it never made the ballot, and we proceed with normal, with whatever gets approved in the budget. If it gains the proper signatures and 18 an hour is going to get put on the ballot, we postpone until we know if it passes. I know California just approved for fast food restaurants $20 an hour. Yeah, yesterday. Yes. So, it's precedent has been set. We set it back in 2016 when we went from $8.05 to $10 an hour. The same process happened, Prop 206. So, it's to a point, and precedent has been set to a point that we need to plan for this. So this is the plan. Hold off on new capital, which has a dollar for dollar impact in our reserve fund. We'll hold off on allowance spend. We'll spend allowance funds for emergency purposes only, not just unplanned events, but emergency events only. A well pump going out, that's an emergency event. There's 420,000 budgeted in there, and we anticipate we could save 125,000 by simply using those funds for emergency purposes only. And then in operating expense, deferring operating projects that aren't capital items that have to be expensed in the operations of roughly 100,000 in the form of parking lot seal and stripes and golf cart paths. This will get us through fiscal year 2025 and put us on the right path to our current budgeted reserve fund balance, keeping us at 47% on our fully funded balance percent. So I also want to point out, we talked a little bit earlier when we were talking about the capital budget. So we have a 30-year plan on a reserve study. Okay, and we post 5 years out. So if you go into the budget packet, you'll see we have those reserve items over the next 5 years lined out. And you can see what's coming up on the reserve study for the next 5 years. I encourage you to look at that. That'll show you exactly what we're doing and what we're planning for. But we take those amounts and we insert those into our modeling as we roll forward. So those all tie back to the modeling. All right. Within that modeling, we also budget $1.8 million in new capital per year. Okay? This year we'll end up, we're anticipating a little over $1 million in new capital spend. Now that doesn't include the allowance funds. So, I'm sorry, not this year. This year we'll have $500,000 roughly, but in this budget is $1 million in new capital spend. So we do model out new capital as well, Because we know we're going to have new capital, yet we don't know what that is. It's not like the reserve study. Because the reserve study, we know exactly what's hitting every year. But I want people to understand that because it all has an impact on the reserve fund, which has an impact on our fully funded balance percentage. And new capital has a dollar for dollar impact. If you don't do new capital, it's a dollar for dollar impact into the reserve fund. That concludes my presentation.
I'd like to make some comments before we open it up to the committee. What you're seeing is the beginning. As Cliff said, California has just raised their minimum wage to $20 an hour. Not across the board, but it was for a selected group of people. We're looking at Arizona at an $18. Just as a point of information, if we did this for a year, it meant $1.6 million over and above what we've already budgeted for, over and above. We're only going to have to deal with this for about 6 months, but we have a choice, and the choice is that we can do nothing, and if we do, would be financially irresponsible. Our financial situation would be precariously close to something that we don't want it to be, or we can hedge our bet and to have a strategy where we look at our capital, and right now the capital that's at risk is probably, as Cliff said, around $600,000. Now, all of the committees have already recommended that the governing board pull out X number of projects. We just talked about the projects that we wanted to pull out in Budget and Finance Committee, and that totaled $375,000 of direct. There was another one that was an R&R for $490,000, but that won't add towards what we want to pull out. So that $600,000 may not be $600,000, but on the same token, we're risking our new capital. We're delaying it. The strategy that Cliff suggests, I think, is excellent, that we do this in phases. Phase 1 will be to identify the amount of dollars in capital, the projects, to not to purchase any. Phase 2 will be to wait to see if the petition is certified and if it's going to be put on the ballot. And then the final one was, if it's approved, then we know what we have to do. And if it's not approved by voters, then that's a different story again. But this is the beginning. I guarantee you that we're going to be facing an increase in minimum wage, and it's going to hit us directly right in the pocketbook. So this is over and above. Now, we still have our budget for FY25. It seems to be in pretty good shape, but we may want to do some tweaking to that. So that's over and above what we'll be doing immediately. So at that, I'm going to open up the discussion to the committee, and I'll recognize whoever wishes to speak first. Mr. Bosak.
Cliff, it might be helpful for the audience if you put the slide back up with the new capital so they can see the 600,000 that you're talking about. So those are the projects that are being delayed.
That's right.
If anybody has an expectation that something's going to happen from previous conversations or presentations that you heard, not going to happen, excuse me, if it's on this list.
Right.
Director Novello?
And that was a great suggestion, as usual, Mr. Bosak. Now we can see a visual, but remember, as you were mentioning, that would be the worst case scenario. If this makes it to the ballot and passes, we would, these would be at risk or on hold. But as Director Rhodes was explaining, we have a couple of dates. There's a possibility for this year, anyway. We would know in some, probably by mid-July, whether or not the spending for these items can proceed or not. If one of these initiatives, if the most expensive, if you will, the $18 initiative makes it to the ballot, then we have to hold off on spending for these and some of these other items until November, until we know the exact disposition. But thanks for that. I also wanted to just add, again, if I didn't say it last time, thank you and your team for putting together the proposal. It's painful, but this is outside of everybody's hands. It's great to have a plan, a contingency plan, and a risk approach. I'm in support of what you've come up with. Thank you.
Mr. Brignato?
Thank you, Dick. First off, Cliff, this is a tremendous plan, and as far as I'm concerned, nothing more needs to be done about this issue until we actually find out whether or not or which of the two proposals would go through, and we don't know because there's two on the table. But it's pretty clear to me that you've got a good handle on this, and we're in a wait-and-see mode going forward. Question I have is, and I heard it again this morning, is you estimate that the cost of an $18 minimum wage will run about $1.6 million. Is that correct?
Yes.
And I did some math, and we're talking about roughly a $60 per resident bump in their dues just to cover that increase. Is that correct?
I'll have to, I didn't do the exact math on it, but it sounds about right.
Roughly 60.
Your math, that was.
The question I have is that in that figure, that 1.6 million, I know that we've got quite a few people on the payroll that aren't making $18 an hour now, but I'm sure that there are any number of people somewhere that are making $18 an hour already. In that 1.6 million figure, are you also anticipating that we're going to have to take those people that are $18 an hour now and increase them to some other figure costing even more money, just so they don't feel like they're making $18 minimum wage?
Good question. So I don't have the slide here today, but I put a slide up. We have 489 positions in the budget that we would, when I came up with the 1.6 million, within that number, 455 employees would be impacted. We have roughly, which would go all the way down into our pay structure, even impacting 11 salaried employees. It's phased in, so everybody doesn't get a bump of $2.65 off of the current minimum wage in the budget of $15.65. All right, so it's $2.65 for everybody making less than $18 an hour, and then it's phased in after that. So someone making 18 may go up $1.50. Somebody making 19 may go up $1, and so on through the budget. But it's phased in to address the compression issues that would be created.
So people that have been quite content to do their jobs all along at $18 an hour currently, or 19 and change, and I'm sure they're perfectly happy, they're going to get increases to do the exact same job that they were happy doing at 18 or 19. In other words, we're going to be bumping up not just those who are making less than $18 an hour, but we're also going to be bumping up people who make more than 18 because, and I'll say because so they don't feel slighted that suddenly they're in the minimum wage category again. We don't want to hurt their feelings. And that was a sarcastic comment, by the way. I think that we need to revisit that policy, and residents need to understand that, hey, we've got to hold costs down. You're doing the same job you were doing before, and we don't see any need to change the salary structure for that job simply because the minimum wage has grown. That's my personal feeling. Again, I'm going to go back to what I said. You did a tremendous job in this proposal, and I don't see where we need to do anything else until we know if these initiatives even pass. I've also said it before, this is for the benefit who haven't heard it yet. This is an initiative that's being driven by a socialist organization out of Cambridge, Massachusetts. I don't think that there's anyone in Arizona who has asked for this, and the people who are behind this are driving to have the entire country be paid an $18 minimum wage. When you start to get into price controls like that, it will not do anything for the economy, and so I hope that the people of not only Sun City West, but all of Arizona vote with their heads this time. Thank you.
Comments from any other committee members? Do we have any comments from Mr. Parsons?
No comments from him yet. We do have online comments, though.
Okay, let me do the audience first. So, do we have any comments from the audience?
Hugh Martin, 122481. My concern is with respect to this potential occurrence is that we are going to address it by automatically increasing the dues of the membership. I think we should look for other ways to mitigate that problem if it shall occur. But I really am annoyed with the notion that if this happens, the only thing we can then do is increase the dues of the members. I think we have to think a little larger than that.
Thank you.
No one said that, by the way. That was just one person's input, just so that the audience understands. The governing board has never suggested that. We would have to revisit that whole notion, though, sir. We'd have to make up the difference somewhere.
Good morning, committee. Director Rhodes. Bruce Lees, 135422. Again, I propose that the Budget and Finance Committee strenuously review the new capital improvement spend proposals included for the 24-25 budget to suspend any funds being proposed to be spent pending the outcome of the ballot initiative to raise the minimum wage increase and recommend to the governing board these expenditures be delayed until the outcome of the ballot initiative is determined, whether it be at the signature gathering point or actually being on the ballot and voted. It is not prudent to spend the association's capital on projects that are deemed wants and not needs. In respect to the conversation that we just had about compression of wages, if I'm not incorrect, approximately 65% of the revenue that's generated in Sun City West goes to pay for benefits, salaries of employees, both full-time and part-time. If the wage initiative comes forward and is voted in, then the people that make less than 18 are going to be bumped to 18. I see no reason to reward employees getting an increase that are currently making 18 to a higher wage just for the simple fact is it will make them feel good. This is money out of everybody's pockets. I also propose that there be a moratorium on merit increases until the initiative is either determined to be valid and voted in or not eligible for a ballot initiative because of lack of signatures. We need to constrain costs, and it shouldn't all be borne on the back of the membership. Thank you.
Nick Turner, 131829. If the federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour had kept up with inflation, today it would be $24 an hour. So to a certain extent, we're still getting a good deal. But it also means be prepared for 18 not being the be-all and end-all. It's going to continue going up. And that's something we need to think about and be prepared about. Other industry and other businesses, when they're faced with this kind of increase, they can often invest in technology to make people more productive. In our kind of service business, that's very, very difficult. You know, we can't go for robotic burger flippers. That's not going to help us very much. You know, I don't know of any robots that can clean toilets and navigate themselves their way around a building. So it's something we're going to have to learn to live with. We have to be efficient where we can. You know, maybe the capital purchases we do for things like golf course maintenance, we can invest in things which are going to make people more productive. As for compression, you cannot increase people's salaries up the line or wages up the line as minimum wage increases. But over time, you will find yourself in a position where the good people that you want to give a pay raise to are in fact not getting the pay raise, and so they're going somewhere else. You'll find yourself increasingly in a competitive labour market. The people who have the best staff, the people who have the best staff retention are the best local employers. And the best local employers do, in fact, reward good staff. And we need to make sure that we continue to do that. Otherwise, we'll find ourselves running without the best staff. And when you run without the best staff, your costs go up again. It's a tough situation. It's not one that we want to be in, but we have to understand how to manage it.
Could you wait until we have, would you wait until we've completed all of the other members that have spoken? You've spoken once.
Sue Ambler, 129848. Chairman Rose, I would ask that the committee would refrain from sarcastic comments and also from political comments during a meeting. And I'm absolutely happy to go to the recording afterwards and point that out to you. Thank you.
Hugh Martin, 122481. With respect to the comment about inflation, I think it's a valid point, but we have to keep in mind that this is really a retirement community. We like to talk about it being a golf community, but the one thing most of us have in common that live here is that we're retired, and inflation affects us as much as it affects everyone else. We should keep that in mind as well.
Thank you. Do we have any online comments?
We do. Richard Baker, 126293. How does capital spending compare to annual depreciation?
Cliff, can you take that one?
Well, I'm gonna guess that this question is a reference to our reserve study and our useful life on our reserve study versus our useful life on our books for depreciation. So I would say that those two don't align. For example, you can depreciate a vehicle for 5 years or a piece of equipment for 7 years, but we put it on the reserve study at a longer term because we know that we're going to get more use out of it. So as far as and then the other thing is all of the items on our capital asset schedule aren't necessarily on our reserve study because we have buildings and land and things like that, land improvements and things like that. So that's kind of how they relate. I would say they're not dollar for dollar because of how we analyze useful life and what's considered a repair and replacement and what isn't.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments? Okay, thank you very much. I think we still have some business on this that we need to take care of. I would like to have some type of a recommendation that we move forward to the governing board. The workshop is next week, and so I'd like to have some type of a recommendation that we can forward and that will be discussed at the workshop. So I can start something if you want. I can start a recommendation. It's going to have to be wordsmithed, but it's really going to be a mirror of the proposal that Cliff has presented to us. And it is a multi-step or a three-phase recommendation that we delay any capital spending until roughly it's July the 15th, because that's the first date of the certification of, is that the filing date or the certification date?
I don't know the exact date. I know they have till July 3rd to produce the signatures.
So the 15th is what would be the date. So that would be the phase one. And then the second is if that is moved forward, then it goes to the initiative is certified for the November ballot. And if it's certified for the November the ballot, that would be November the 11th. And then phase three is if it'll be on the ballot and it will be voted upon. And that's also approximately November 10th or November the 11th. Okay, please.
I will make an attempt, but it'll be a lot shorter than what you just said. The Budget and Finance Committee recommends that the governing board accept the contingency plan proposal assembled by CFO Cliff Swan and implement that in the budget for fiscal year 24-25.
I'm looking at Mr. Bosack to make sure that you capture that. Okay. Well, we'll actually need it because we'll want to reread it and then get a consensus from the committee.
I think, Dick, all of us heard it. I would be willing to second the motion, second the recommendation as read.
I think we should reread it, and then we can go through.
We could go to the tape, too, after the fact.
We'll go to the tape, yeah. But we do want to make sure that everyone understands it. Okay, so Gary, can you?
Budget and Finance recommends that the governing board accepts the contingency plan presented by CFO Cliff Swan and implements it in fiscal year 2024-25.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. So I'm going to, do we have any discussion on that? No. Okay, so I'm going to start with, okay, thank you. Do we have any questions from the audience?
Bruce Lees, 135422. I'm just seeking some clarification. So if the Budget and Finance Committee recommends the proposal that Cliff has elaborately drawn up, is that basically eliminating all new capital spend to be approved by our board at the May meeting for the 24-25 budget?
The objective is to find $825,000.
Yes.
Okay. So at this point, we're looking at, we have a proxy amount of $600,000 in new capital. My guess, and let me repeat that, my guess is that there will be pullouts. Okay. And the pullouts, just for an example, in the Budget and Finance Committee, we recommended in new capital alone, pull out of $375,000.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that would come off of that 600,000.
Correct.
So does that address what?
It gets me halfway there.
Okay.
Understanding that softball fence proposal is not in a new capital spend, but it's in a R&R. But that was also voted and recommended to be withdrawn, but it doesn't affect how we go forward with the budget and then this potential expenditure with the minimum wage increase. So I was basically looking at everything that was in the yellow there and new projects. In addition to the major capital project spends, all those $5,000 and $7,000 and $9,000 items would also come off, like the 3 new flag poles and all that?
No,
New capital.
no.
Well, Cliff's shaking his head yes, and you're shaking your head no. That's why I'm
Oh,
looking
yes,
for
yes, I'm-
clarification.
I'm sorry, we would,
Sorry.
yes, yes, you're right, I'm sorry, I was thinking something else. Yes, all of that new capital would be put on hold until the.
We had a
the deadline-
determination.
Yes. the
Yes,
deadline
okay.
is-
That's the clarification I was looking for. Thank you very much.
Yep. No, I'm glad you did, because I was thinking something differently. Do we have other questions from the floor? Do we have any questions online?
We have a comment pertaining to the capital budget, so we can hold on to that, not pertaining to this.
Not pertaining to this issue. Okay. Did Mr. Parsons comment at all?
He has given his vote, if you will, online. He agrees with Cliff's minimum wage proposal and the recommendation proposal to the governing board.
Okay, well, that would be our next item. So, Gary, would you read the proposal one more time, and then we're going to poll our members.
Budget and Finance recommends the governing board accept the contingency plan presented by CFO Cliff Swan and implements it in the fiscal year 2024-25.
Okay, so the response will be, if it's a yes, you support that, and it's no, you do not support that. And we're going to start with you, Ms. Kellis.
Yes.
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 And for the record, Mr. Parsons voted yes, so it was a unanimous decision. Okay. And we will forward that to the governing board. Hopefully, we'll get it into the workshop on the 12th. Okay, thank you. We do have some time left today, and if we want to talk about the FY25 budget, I would open the floor to that. You know, we've, just to kind of give you some points to ponder, one of them is the recommendation of an increase of APF from 5,000 to 5,200, increase of our dues from 530 to 570, I believe, 540 to 570, okay? I think the estimate of golf rounds was identified in there as well, and we have looked at all of those, but I want to open the floor for any discussion, for anything that any of the committee members would like to address.
One change to the budget that I didn't state earlier was that there was a request from Director Novello to include the insurance rate increases in the assumptions, and those are also on the packet in the assumptions section.
What I'd like to do, Cliff, is I'd like to come back on the next BNF and have another very brief overview of the operating budget. And at that point, I think we as a committee will make a formal recommendation on it. We're not in that position today. I really wanted to focus in on the strategy for the proposals for the increase of minimum wage, but I don't want to lose the fact that we haven't really done a final on the actual budget itself yet. So that will be an agenda item at the next Budget and Finance Committee meeting. So if you would be prepared to do kind of an executive summary of that, and I would ask the committee members to do your diligence, to do your homework, and come and be prepared to discuss that so we can make a final recommendation to the governing board regarding the budget. Okay?
Okay, couple of things. If I can plug, we've got our community forums on April 17th and 18th, and those will be after our next BNF meeting.
Okay.
We do have a governing board workshop next Friday,
12.
the 12th. So there will be some potential for changes in between
Okay.
now and then. But for everyone in here and everybody listening online, please plan to attend, come on the 17th or 18th. We have a separate presentation. Of course, it includes the budget details. It's I would say a higher level presentation, but includes all the details in the attachments and open discussion for the community. And it's an opportunity for us to get some feedback as well. And it's a great opportunity to really get any Q&A answered, not just from myself, but we have our management team up on stage and can really speak to some of the individual line items or individual questions or things like that. So please come and attend that. It'll be a good presentation.
And I would also encourage you to do that. We have seen the budget. My personal feeling, I think it looks very strong. I think it looks very good, but you know, it is still subject to change. So at that, we'll have final comments from our committee members. Ms. Kellis, could we start with you?
No comment.
Okay, Mr. Bosak?
Nothing, thank you.
No comment.
No comment.
No further comment?
Nothing?
Did Mr. Parson include anything for us?
No comments from Mr. Parsons, but we do have audience comments.
Okay, so let's do the audience here first. So do we have any final comments or remarks from anyone in the audience? Okay, so we have comments from the YouTube.
Yes, this was from Richard Baker, 126293. It came in after we had completed some of our other discussions. So this was a follow-up to the capital spending and depreciation question that Cliff answered. Cash or impact on the reserve fund, if I understand correctly, no response needed now, but Cliff did not really answer my question. I'm just reading the comment verbatim. Perhaps an email back to you, Director Rhodes, to clarify?
Yes, I
would
believe
be
so. We
helpful?
want to resolve that. And I would address, I'm sorry, what's his name again? Mr.
Richard Baker.
Mr. Baker, if you can contact me through the governing board website, and I will be happy to broker that and to get a more comprehensive explanation from Mr. Swan. Okay, all right. So at that, it is it's 10:48. Our next meeting is here on April the 16th. It's 10:48, and this meeting is adjourned.